Hello and welcome to Cincinnati Soccer Talk here on this Monday evening. Glad you're with us. FC Cincinnati over the weekend falling to Minnesota United 1-0. Very, very, very late in that match. So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about the horrible call at the end of the match that led to the goal for Minnesota United. And, of course, we're going to talk a lot about the trade deadline coming up, and it wouldn't be the last week of Nippert Stadium in FC Cincinnati's history with us discussing our favorite Nippert memories. And, of course, we want to hear from you tonight. We've opened up the phone lines, 513-399-KICK. Get in touch with us. We want to hear from you, FC Cincinnati fans, on your favorite memories, your thoughts on the season as a whole, what you're looking forward to this offseason, and a whole bunch more. Again, get in touch with us, 513-399-KICK. Of course, if you're watching us live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, we appreciate you tuning in. But if you're listening after the fact, you can always email us feedback@CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. Let's welcome in my cast of characters for this week. I will start with, I'll be nice, the nice twin, Brian Weigel. Brian, how are you, buddy?
Cautiously optimistic because 538.com said we do have less than a 1% chance of making the playoffs. So we got a shot. We can do this.
This is where I wish I had Jason Davis's board drop to say, so you're telling me there's a chance.
Tell me there's a chance. Yeah, very, very slight, almost none. Shoot, I can't remember the outfit down in Nashville. I think Ben Wright put something along, like he put a projections of like average finishes for the team, and we don't even make like the possible playoff line. So, oh well. It's almost done. 2020's almost over.
It's like the saying goes, right? There's always next year. We're kind of used to that saying here in the Queen City, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. That's the Cincinnati motto.
It should be on that flag.
There's always next year.
That's all right. Let's welcome in the professor, Jeff Wallner. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to the last match at Nippert. I think I'm expecting it to be a very, very surreal experience. Haven't really come to grips with it, and maybe I will after tonight, and we rehash a lot of the best memories in Nippert Stadium in terms of FC Cincinnati's history. So looking forward to it. A little bit surreal, certainly not what any of the fans wanted to have it kind of go out this way, but we'll make the best of it, and we'll have some fun tonight talking about it.
That's right. A reminder, if you're watching us live, get in touch with us. We want to hear your thoughts on your favorite memories at Nippert Stadium, 513-399-KICK. Get in touch with us here on the CST hotline. Well, this gentleman's been a guest on our show before. We're excited to have him tonight as finally a CST contributor. He is the one and only DJ Switzer, co-host of the Wrong Side of the Pond podcast. DJ, how are you? Welcome to CST.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's good to finally be a contributor on the show. Late coming, but as always, a good late edition.
Well, appreciate you being on the show, DJ. Obviously we tapped you a few months ago because you know a lot about the world of soccer. And so really looking forward to getting your thoughts on not only the FC Cincinnati match over the weekend, but the fact that, you were formerly an employee at FC Cincinnati. So you have a different perspective as far as being at Nippert week in and week out.
Yeah, that's right. It's been a couple of years since I was an employee with the club, but Nippert holds a really special place in my heart. Over the last couple of years, it's been a really innovative home for FC Cincinnati in a way that many of us didn't think it was going to be. So I'm excited that I get to be there on Wednesday night to see the last match off, and I know that's quite the privilege to get to do that because not many people are getting to do so right now. But no, it'll be a fun time and an interesting way to cap a 5-year run at Nippert.
Absolutely. And again, like I said, if you're watching us live on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, and you want to chime in, maybe you don't want to call in, but maybe you want to let us know what your favorite memories are, put them in the chat. We'll put them up on the video as well. That way you can get involved here on the show. As we always do when we start off an episode of Cincinnati Soccer Talk, we offer up our best and worst. So, Brian, why don't you get us started tonight? What's your best and worst from the weekend against Minnesota United?
Well, I'll start with my worst. I think it would have to be just the inability to really get the ball consistently into dangerous positions and to finish any chances that we have. And I'm looking at you, Sem Young. Had high hopes for you this year. I've been rooting for you. I wanted to see you in this 9 role that we saw. I'm cautiously optimistic, if you can get your legs under you a little bit more. But yeah, just the theme of the year, just can't get that dang ball over the line. And I think it's time that we make some tough decisions and maybe have to move forward with somebody else going in the future.
And your best?
My best is the Cincinnati boy, Nick Hagelin, and Tom Pedersen center back combo. We've been talking about it all year, how poor our center backs have been. And these two guys lately have performed admirably, and it makes me feel better going into this offseason that we do need an overhaul on that back, but I don't think it has to be as drastic as we maybe had once thought. So those two have been playing very well, and excited to see what they can do over the last 3 matches.
That's a good shout, Bri, because I think when the deal was made to bring in Nick Hagelin last season, we all thought, wow, they gave up a lot to get him. And now this year, they've called his name quite a bit. And where would this team be, DJ, if they didn't have Nick Hagelin on the roster? Because they've been depleted at that spot all season long.
Yeah, it's wild that we're even saying Nick Hagelin is the person that we're really glad that we have around at this tail end of the season. But that's really kind of what it's turned into, right? And Nick, to his credit, he had a battle with COVID, which is a struggle in its own right. But then he stepped up when he came back in a way that I think a lot of us didn't expect him to be capable of. Nick, for better or worse, has been a little bit of a whipping boy within the FC Cincinnati fan base because the team spent so much money to acquire him in that first season. And he stepped up to kind of fit that price tag a little bit, at least in the tail end of the season, in the way he's consistently performed and been arguably the team's best center back over the tail end of the season.
What are your thoughts, Jeff, on the center back pairing?
Love what I've seen from both of those guys. So it is going to be interesting to see how it develops over time and where these guys fit. But yeah, Hagelin, just like DJ said, when he was signed, there was concern over what the club gave up to get him, and there was concern about, are we just bringing a local guy home, or are we getting a quality player? I remember talking to Jeff Birding about it, and he insisted, we weren't getting Hagelin because he was a local guy. We're getting him because we believe he can help the team. And it's taken a while for him to really show his full ability, but love what I'm seeing from him.
Not to jump on this too long, but we did give the house away to get this guy, and he's not a Walker Zimmerman out there. I hope we can get a Walker Zimmerman type of player next year, but it is good to at least have, a guy who's on a reasonable salary, knowing that if he's our 3rd or 4th center back in 2021, we're in a decent position.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, give me your best and worst.
My best, I'm going to go with Kemo Makocho, and I think we're seeing more of his quality every match. Love his patience on the ball. He's really starting to kind of develop and settle into the passing game the more familiar he gets with the system and with the players around him. Love his pace in quality. It's really been impressive for me. And then my worst, and I hate to pick on, because he's still such a young player, but we've seen a lot of quality from Frankie Amaya. But I'm just not seeing Frankie. I don't notice him on the pitch. He's not wowing me that he has at moments. He's still a very young player. But there were other guys that maybe didn't have great performances the other night, but I just wanted to point out Frankie because he's a player that I've been really impressed with, but recently I've just not seen him kind of get into the matches.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Kamahilo Mokocho, Jeff. When I was watching the match over the weekend and watching him play, there just something clicked with me. He reminded me a little bit of Darlington Nagbe out on the pitch, the way he was all over that midfield. I don't want to say he was bossing the game, but he was doing well, connecting, trying his best to connect what is the defense to what our offense currently is at the moment. But am I far off in seeing a little bit of Darlington Nagbe there?
Well, if he had a 10 that could maybe, give him a deep breath on the pitch, yeah, I like it. I think he's changed this whole dynamic of the team over his short span.
Yeah, I think he's definitely bringing a new element to the midfield that we didn't have before. He covers so much ground and breaks up not just plays, but passing lanes in a way that we really haven't had a defensive midfielder doing that. And just to kind of track back a little bit on the Frankie stuff, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think he has tailed off a bit, Jeff. But he has also been asked to play like 3 or 4 different roles this season.
You're right. Yeah.
And it's been so tough for him to even find a footing. And for a young player who's, still by all means establishing himself in the league, I think it's tough for him to find that consistency because it's changing week in and week out on what he's trying to do. So I agree. He wasn't necessarily the best player on the pitch last time out or the last few times out. But I want to keep that in mind as we evaluate Frankie going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. And still relatively young. He's only 20.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of growing there to be done by Frankie and Maya. All right, DJ, how about your best and worst?
Yeah, so I'll start with my best. I'm going to give a shout out to Stam, Yap Stam, because he's taken a lot of heat from everyone, myself included, over the last few months as he's tried to figure out a way to make this FC Cincinnati side successful. But to his credit, he keeps going back to the well and going in with new ways of trying to solve his team's problems. We see some coaches that just stick with a system. They're like, nope, forget it. This is what's going to work. And eventually these guys will click and it'll all fall together. And it never really works out. In Stam's case, he's continued to try new stuff. And what I saw the last match out was a really new tactic that we've not seen much with these underlapping outside backs, where we saw, Gutman, and then on the reverse side, it's evading me at the moment. Who's
Zico Bailey?
Yeah, thank you, Zico. And Zico had a great match, I thought, especially for his full debut. And we saw them cutting to the inside of those wide players in Barreal and Zhao up on the front flanks. And it's more of a sign that Stam is like, okay, that's not working. Let's try something new. And I don't think we've had that with some of the coaches in the past. And if nothing else, I want to give him credit there for continuing to try to figure out a way to get some goals out of this team.
How about your worst?
My worst, I'm going to go with someone else that's been named already, in CM De Jong. He just, I had such higher expectations for him and his pedigree. Obviously, he's battled injuries, and it's tough to come back from that, especially as you get on in years as a midfielder. But I really just expected him to be more influential, and his lack of impact in most of the matches that he's played in so far. Not to say that he hasn't had some good matches here and there. It just hasn't been enough, and it's been so few and far between that. Again, the other night, I was left feeling very empty about his performance.
Yeah, missed a couple of chances in that match. Had a header from the 6-yard box, and then obviously skied what we thought would be, I wouldn't call it a sitter, but it was still a shot that a person of his quality should be bearing, Brian. And this is one of your worst. You talked about finishing. I mean, those are 2 opportunities you would think somebody like Siem de Jong would be able to finish.
Yeah, shots sponsored by El Jimador this week. Yeah, man, I was excited when I saw the header early on, but I mean, just having the poise to at least get the ball in frame versus just kicking a field goal in Nippert, which is wrong sport. I 100% agree with DJ. It's just I expected so much more out of this guy, and we just aren't seeing it. I mean, you see in practice and all the team of the weeks, and he's always there. He's a talented player. I just don't know if he's just the guy we need, and if there's a true role for him on the squad.
Yeah.
Is there and this is probably a topic for the end of the season, but if you're looking at who's maybe the biggest disappointment of this season,
there's a list.
Is there there's a list. There is a list, but disappointment when you weigh the expectations for the player. A lot of guys are playing poorly, but when you weigh the expectations of the player coming in, versus the performance that you got. Sim DeYoung's got to be up there.
It's like 1A and 1B for me, right? Like
Mhm.
we had full expectations of a player like DeYoung's pedigree to come in and play well in Major League Soccer. Then also Jurgen Locadia, which kind of leads into my best, right? He's been injured, finally got back onto the pitch after a couple weeks, and we saw him in a position we haven't really seen him at, and that was playing out on the wing, there on the left wing. Now, I'm not saying that should be his position going forward, especially for the price tag, but I thought for a guy who is struggling with, we can say struggling with confidence, right, in front of goal, I thought it was a smart move by Jaap Stam, and this is where DJ brings up the tinkering. I thought this was a great move to put him out on the wing, let him attack a player 1v1. Don't have scoring goals as your main I mean, look, we need to score goals. I get that. But like, I think letting him get involved in different ways on the pitch versus just being that target 9 or trying to get in behind, I think it actually suited him a little bit. And so it almost like he played a little bit more free. DJ, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was good, one, just to see him back on the pitch. Obviously, the amount of time he spent off of it for FC Cincinnati so far this season is problematic in its own right. But once he did get out there, he was put out on the left. He had some fresh legs. I think that helped him out a little bit as well, given that everyone else had already gone for a bit. But the other thing that I thought was really good about that is it's a role that he's played before. In Europe, and he's actually been fairly successful in that role. And you know, we keep trying to force him into this 9 role, and we've seen this so often where we bring a player in and we have this expectation, De Jong's going to be our perfect 10 and Locadia is going to be our 9. And what it might actually be is that these guys are actually slightly different than what those roles actually are. And I think what we're seeing is Locadia probably is better operating from that flank. It allows him a little bit different approach. He's not the focal point of the attack. And he might be able to not just be a provider out there, but also a bit more of a goal scorer. Some guys thrive coming in from that wider position. And when we've seen him be most effective is often when he's cutting in from the flanks.
Yeah, when he gets space, he's a player who's better when he has space, not when his back's to goal and 2 guys sitting on his shoulder. And that's what we saw out there on the wing this weekend. Again, do I want to pay a guy as much as he's getting paid and that transfer fee to go sit on that wing? I mean, Carlos Vela can do it, but he also scores 20 some odd goals a year. So
27 more than Locadia scored.
Yeah, so I'd maybe like to see it a little bit more over this next 3 matches and see. But yeah, I agree. I think this is a guy that likes to run at the goal and not be the hold up guy.
I liked his body language. I really did, and part of that. DJ, you mentioned he's fresh legs. He's back out there. He's got fresh legs. He was going to bring some energy, but he didn't look like a guy who was playing out of position. He really looked fresh and had a lot of energy. And I thought he looked good out there. But yeah, long term, is that the solution? We'll certainly see how that develops. But
yeah, as far as my worst. I think it needs to be talked about because it was obviously a pivotal part of the match, but I don't know how the official could miss that call there at the end. I also don't understand how this also couldn't have been reviewed. Like it affected the game, this bad call, right? Like it was, I mean, in hindsight, if that goal is not scored, like nobody's talking about this missed call, but the fact that a goal came from it, you just got to wonder, like, well, what's the purpose of having VAR? And I know there are arguments about should we even have it in the first place, but like we have the technology, they should be utilizing it. So, gentlemen, I know that's not why you can say that's why FC Cincinnati lost the game from the bad call. So what are your thoughts when you saw that and you saw the reaction from Nick Haglund when the initial call was made? Did you almost feel like, oh no, it's going to happen? And sure enough, it did.
Well, you can't allow a match to be decided that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, you're fine. They put themselves in that situation. What I mean is that if you don't, keep going at the goal and you don't keep generating chances, you're going to rely, or you're going to get snake bit like that. And vice versa, if you put yourself in those situations, you have a lot more of a chance that you're actually going to get that call. So not great. Wish it'd be right. What's VAR there for? But yeah, I mean, just it's on us, man. We gotta not put ourselves in these situations. Our margins are already so thin.
Yeah, and Jaap Stam's talked about making your own luck, and of course, he's not the first coach in sports to talk about that. But that's kind of the underlying moral of the story. But if you have VAR and you're an official in that position, and I mean, you see the reaction. I mean, obviously, it was something worth looking at in that situation. You can't let the match at that stage be decided by something like that. So if you have VAR, you need to use it. But yeah, the underlying moral of the story is you make your own luck. If you take care of business, the rest of the 90 minutes, then you're not in that position. But that was unfortunate. That was an unfortunate way to end a match because FC Cincinnati deserved a point that night.
Got to defend the corner, right, DJ?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest issue, right? Is again, we're seeing this team lose their concentration, right? We've seen them do it at the beginning of the match. We've seen them do it at the end of match. We've seen them do it at the end of halves. This team has a nasty habit of losing their concentration at those most pivotal moments in the match when you really can't be losing your concentration. And you mentioned it, Nick, when you first posed the question, like, did anyone else worry when they saw Nick Hagglund's reaction? And my immediate reaction was, oh crap, like there's going to be a goal here, or at least a close opportunity, because they were so concerned about the call that they lost focus of the match. And the VR issues are what they are. If you look across the pond this weekend, they were all over the place there once again, much like they have weekend after weekend after weekend. That's just what VAR is. And what it currently is being utilized as. But I think the bigger issue is that we again saw the team utilize it as a crutch. Like, there's the referees again. And it's kind of like what Jeff's saying, like, we can't keep going back to this well of like, well, it was this time. Like, if they would just take care of the business on the finishing front or create some more of these opportunities when they're getting into these advanced positions, then they don't have to worry about the bad luck of a referee call or, an unfortunate skip or deflection. Those things are taken care of because you've taken care of the opportunities earlier on in the match.
So the match finishes 1-0. Again, FC Cincinnati conceding very late in the match with opportunities to score, right? I mean, Sim de Jong misses 2, what we thought could have been some good opportunities. Locadia late in the match getting into some dangerous positions. With just a little bit of a lack of cohesion there with him and some of the other guys up front. So overall, as you sit back and kind of reflect on what you saw Saturday night against Minnesota, a really good, by the way, Minnesota's no slouch. They're doing really well this year. Did you see positive signs for FC Cincinnati as we wind things down here in 2020, Bri?
Oh, man. Not enough positive signs. I think that's kind of where we're all at right now is we do see incremental change, but I think we all hoped by this time in this season we'd be battling, or at least maybe making a last minute push, not losing to DC United and the worst team in the East, and then a struggling, I guess, Minnesota side. So yeah, disappointing that we couldn't take advantage. This is a good opportunity that we could have with Minnesota really not wanting to be on the ball and us trying our new style, I guess you could say. But yeah, I just want more this whole year. Just want more.
Yeah, I think it's hard. It falls on deaf ears when you watch the match and it's another loss. It's another score. It's another goalless match. It's another loss. Any hope of the playoffs probably had already slipped away in reality. But it falls on deaf ears when you talk about the progress that's being made and you talk about what Jaap Stam is trying to instill in these guys. And DJ mentioned it, that he's trying whatever he can to make the best use of the roster that's at his disposal. And if you watch them play, there really isn't. There are some similarities to what went on last year, but there are very few. The only thing that remains a constant is they're continuing to lose, and they're falling deeper in the standings, and they're not making a push for the playoffs. And it's easy to say, well, nothing has changed since last year. But if you watch them play for 90 minutes, things have changed. And I have a great deal of confidence in Jaap Stam moving forward. I really do. It's not that any manager is above criticism, and he's certainly not at times, but this guy just needs he needs a roster at his disposal, and that's not his responsibility.
What are your thoughts, DJ? I mean, this was a team that last year conceded a record number of goals in Major League Soccer. You can make the case that they have gotten better on that front. I mean, they're not conceding nearly as much as last year. We're not seeing those 4 and 5 and 7-0 games like we saw last year, but I guess it's baby steps, when you're losing 1-0, 2-0, 2-1.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the metric, right? Like if we're going by the simple metric of did we concede a record number of goals this season, then yes, we have seen massive improvement. If your metric is has the offense also improved, the answer is a resounding no. In fact, it's maybe even regressed. And I think that shows the complexity of actually improving. It's not like a simple, like, oh, just, bring in some good defenders and then that will fix the defense. And then, bring in some good offensive players and that will fix the offense. That's, you can get one part of it clicking, but the other side of it won't. And even if the players are good, and I do think FCC have good players on their roster or at their disposal, but the mix is wrong. And again, until this team can continue to be remade and reshaped from the original form that it was delivered as in MLS, we're going to be stuck with these transitionary growing pains. And we'll see the progress, but it's not going to be steady and consistent until they can get in all the pieces they need to maximize that. So,
stats wise, XG and all that craziness aside, offensively, and okay, Jeff, I do agree with you. We've seen improvements, but XG, looking at their XG for the season, like through 20 matches, our XG is 17. That's just not cutting it. And I do like the little tweaks in here or there, but I mean, we need to take a monumental shift next season, and that includes Kubo, that includes Semdiong if he's here, Locadia. I mean, we have to have a seismic shift with these current players along with those other pieces. And if we don't see that, I mean, we're just going to be in for a world of hurt again.
Last week on the show, DJ, we had Gerard Nijkamp, and he brought up the 4 to 5 transfer window, which surprisingly made the rounds among the national pundits. Did not expect that. But when you heard those comments or read those comments, DJ, what went through your mind?
I think the one thing that really stood out to me about those comments was how they were qualified. Gerard already has thrown out one window where he was here. And I understand that it was a weird situation for him to come into. He would have probably preferred to have come in at a later point. But he already tossed out like one portion of the time that he was here working. And we've kind of like written off the previous Jans era entirely. Like it's almost like we don't talk about it anymore, therefore it doesn't exist. And I don't necessarily disagree with him. Like he needs multiple windows to undo the mess that he was handed. But what really bugs me about that, the framing of it, is that it's the dishonesty kind of the way it's been delivered over the course and the timeline that the team has delivered us that information. At the end of last year, we were promised very explicitly we'd never have another season like this. Well, it's not the same, but it's kind of the same level. It's just a different level of
without
the same
fans
end of things, right? and now what we have is Gerard going, well, I need more time. Well, that's fine. But last year, you weren't telling us that you needed 4 to 5 windows. You told us like, hey, next year we can be competitive. And everyone had talked about, hey, all these pieces that we're bringing in. and we're sitting in kind of the exact same scenario again. And I credit Gerard for saying the things that he needs to say, and that he's right. He does need more time, and that's
Mhm.
good. We're hearing the club admit that, but are we going to be saying that same number of time frames? Are we going to be writing off this year, next year? The story has changed as we've progressed down the line, and that's what bugs me more about it than anything. Of course, this was going to take time, but why are we just now being told that that's how much time it's going to take for us to be a competitive team?
Yeah, and you need the guys that we've already invested in have to make that jump, and a lot of these guys are his guys. I mean, in that first window, he brought in Vanderwerf, and we really haven't seen much improvement out of him. I know he's been hurt, but he had some issues as well. Thank goodness we did have like Joe Zhao come in that window, or else we'd really be hurt Gutman as well. But I mean, just the amount of guys that are here that are going to have to take a jump. It scares me that that we're still going to be trusting a lot of these same pieces going into next year.
Is there anyone specifically you're thinking of?
I think you need to see Loca take a massive jump. I mean, is Harris going to be here next year? I think he's probably been our best player, but is he to the level that we need? So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'd like to see more out of Yuya Kubo. He's our leading goal scorer with 3. I think what did Cruz have 6 last year as our leading goal scorer, or did Ledesma end up with 6? I can't remember. I think it was Cruz. But yeah, that's is there any out of all the players brought in, DJ? Is there one that's kind of I guess that you were expecting a little bit more of? Are you surprised that it didn't pan out?
I mean, there are obviously some easy ones. I mentioned Siem at the beginning of the show. Yeah. I think he's probably the one that's the most disappointing. And it's tough. Central midfielders are so pivotal to teams being successful in Major League Soccer. If you look at all those best teams, having a good attacking 10 to drive your team forward really has been the engine that's made successful MLS teams over the last 5-10 years. So maybe we had wrong expectations for him, especially at the stage he is in his career, the amount of speed he has left in his legs. But I don't know. I mean, I would obviously be disappointed as well. And Vanderwerf, I had high expectations for him. And again, maybe it's just an adjustment issue, and he's just now getting used to the league. But it's been a tough one. None of the players outside of maybe Zhao and Gutman have really bedded immediately.
What I am excited for, DJ, and you're privy, you know a lot more about Major League Soccer rules than a lot of us here is. I'm excited to see how Gerard takes the money on this roster budget, takes the money that he's spending on Caleb Stanko. Say we're throwing $200,000-$300,000 in allocation at him right now, taking that allocation money and trading it and getting a player to come in, and then taking the money he has for Waston and applying that to 1 or 2 different players and see what success that brings and gives us that flexibility going into the future. It's not like USL, where at the end of the season, you say buy to 15 players and bring in 15 new ones. You have to utilize your assets. And I want to see what assets we can get, whether that's him trading this allocation spot before Thursday and getting some allocation money for next year. If he does that, that would show me a lot of things that he's adjusting to the league, learning the league better. And the gentleman in Philadelphia, I can't remember, what's that?
Ernst Tanner.
Ernst Tanner. He's been a wizard at making moves like that and improving his standing. I want to see us start making those moves to set us up for 2021 and 2022.
You know what else he has, though? He has a thriving academy that we don't have.
Well, okay. Brendan Aronson is leaving, and then they're just going to bring in his brother.
His little brother, yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you, Brian, on this. I think what I really want to see more than anything, and maybe this transitions well into the next segment, but I want to see domestic movement. Like we keep returning to the international well, and there's plenty of international well to be had, right? There's loads of good players out there. It's so easy to return to that because they are all out there. But MLS teams tend to be successful because of players who already are well integrated in this domestic system. It's different than everywhere else. It's got a different feel. And the American League has its own kind of cultural elements to it that players tend to sync up well with or don't. And this has always been my concern with this Dutch movement is there enough knowledge of the space that they're working in? And I think this is the right time for them to show, yeah, we've learned some lessons about how you operate in Major League Soccer, and we're going to apply some of those now and try to utilize some of these tools the way other teams are doing it as well.
I'm going to say something that is extremely
buckle up.
podcasting right here. This is naive, but it kind of rings true a little bit here. So Goal.com came out with a great piece, the top 100 U.S. men's national team players. Jason Davis, Jared DuBois on your Best Soccer Show had a great segment about, the 50 top American players. I want Gerard to go through his phone book and contact every agent, every club on that list, and more specifically, guys who aren't playing and who want to get in good standing for 2021 to play in the Gold Cup, to prove to Berhalter, hey, give me another shot to look for Qatar in the World Cup. Honestly, it's low-hanging fruit. I would just love to see any of those guys. Now you get issues like that. Caleb Stanko, that it's a challenging there, but just to get some of these guys and give them a lifeline to go prove yourself, like Joe Zhao again. Get some guys that are hungry, that want to come back, that want to work hard, get back in the U.S. setup, and those are domestic guys. It's going to be, you're not going to throw the allocation money away at those guys like you are, having to trade for a Walker Zimmerman for Nashville. So, I mean, just different ways that we can manage our finances, but also get guys that are hungry, want to be here and prove something, not just take their last paycheck.
Yeah, there's a couple of different tournaments, right, that they're going to want to get some minutes for, not just the Gold Cup, but you got the Olympics. Cross our fingers, maybe if that tournament actually takes place next summer as well. So, well said, Bri. I'm glad you brought that up. Before we move on, I just want to remind you that this show would not be possible without the support of our tremendous supporters. So let's give it up to Tim Bronsel, Tom Rose, Matt Adamczyk, Mike Hudson, Brian Malone, Jamie Smed, Jonas Tom, Jack Emery, Mike Bowman, Kathleen Francis, Matt Imholt, Matthew Long, Joe Coling, Tara Mullins, Riley Stephen Burke, and Melissa Bingle. Thank you so much for supporting us here at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. To learn more on how you could support the show, head on over to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. So one of the topics we wanted to discuss tonight, there was an article in the Sports Business Journal by Mark Burns that the 2021 Major League Soccer season probably is going to be looking at a late start. Historically, Major League Soccer usually starts the first week of March, but with COVID ongoing and the season wrapping up when it's going to be wrapping up here this season, it's looking more and more like this is going to be a late start in 2021, possibly in April, Brian, which means possibly more fixture congestion for next season in Major League Soccer. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, DJ and Jeff might be able to speak to the congestion and how we're going to have to build the roster. This is possibly, and I'm hearing from FC Cincinnati club sources, that it could be into May. Now, this all has to be agreed upon by the union, the clubs. Don Garber today in that article said, this is a league that relies so much on the game day revenue, so they can't take the ginormous loss 2 years in a row. So we'll see how it goes, but I do think it's, with a club needing some finances to go invest, we're just going to open up a huge $250 million venue. I just hope there's some cash lying around to be able to do some things.
Yeah, and as I tweeted earlier, that it does give a little extra time to spruce up the West End Stadium. If you have another month or two, you can throw another fresh coat of paint on it.
You're going to let that turf really settle.
Right.
We more so, we just don't want any pieces of the stadium falling off and hitting any of us in the press box. Like they had in DC,
we want to avoid that. So I don't think this was unexpected, because obviously the extra time also allows them to kind of assess where COVID is and gives a little bit of extra time in that regard, because I don't think any of us know what this will look like next spring, let alone for the rest of this winter. So I also saw they mentioned the CONCACAF Champions League tournament resuming after the MLS Cup on December 12th. So that kind of factors into the later start as well. But I'm sure COVID's a big part of it. So delayed opening of the West End Stadium. So we'll see. We'll see if this does indeed bleed into May.
I thought, for sure when I thought it was going to be a pipe dream that it was going to be ready by March of 2021. I didn't think there was any chance, because not many stadiums open up on time and are finished when they actually do open up. So I always had the expectation that potentially FC Cincinnati was going to spend the first 6 or 7 games on the road until the stadium got finished, and then the West End Stadium would open up sometime in May, which, Bri, your timeline kind of sounds spot on there.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I know there's a lot of things that need to shake out, and maybe we have another MLS is back tournament. You never know.
That's true. Let's hope that is not the case. Although that was a good portion of the year that FC Cincinnati did well. So maybe we do want another tournament.
Hey, man, I just want to rewatch.
We need another bubble.
I just want to rewatch that Frankie Amaya goal that versus Atlanta, because I feel like that's like the most true, besides the Harris Olympico, that's like the only good offensive thing that we had.
Yeah, I was thinking about that tonight when we're here at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. We're getting ready to compile our best of awards for 2020, and one of them was goal of the year. And I thought, man, it's hard to pass up the Olympico, but man, Frankie's goal against Atlanta was pretty nice. So
best haircut, Harris Medunanen of this past week, right?
yeah, a good one. Tom Bogerts from MajorLeagueSoccer.com had an article today about the upcoming trade deadline, which will be this week on Thursday. FC Cincinnati currently sitting at the top of the allocation spot or list, I should say. This is a spot where if they don't do something with the roster or the allocation spot, they will lose it for 2021. And so Tom Bogert reporting that there are a couple of teams negotiating with FC Cincinnati at the moment for the top spot. I don't know what they're going to end up ultimately getting here, guys, but I guess it's promising that there are 2 teams interested. The question is, who are those players involved, and why don't they want? Why wouldn't Cincinnati be going after them? So maybe they don't want to come here. I don't know. But when you read that article today, gents, what were your thoughts?
Well, I kind of thought to you. I kind of wanted to know, what's going on with Kamar Lawrence, but apparently, we weren't able to reach terms
that must have been a hard
this
pass.
club. Oh, dude, I'd love to have him on this team. I mean, I kind of checked off that we aren't going to move that through the end of the year. So if we can turn it into anything, take it, run.
Yeah, I mean,
that was my
know.
thought. Go ahead, DJ.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna reiterate that you have to make use of that in some fashion, because this club needs, whether it be financial help or roster help, but you have to make use of what you have, and I would expect, I would be a little surprised if nothing happens by Thursday. So something certainly will happen with that.
Yeah, I think doing nothing would be a catastrophic failure, like of the worst magnitude. I talked earlier about really wanting them to look into some sort of domestic mechanisms to try to acquire or make some movement. And this seems like the perfect example of, hey, if you want to maximize an MLS, go out and get some of that TAM or GAM that you can potentially get out of that. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of TAM or GAM that you can potentially trade a top spot in the allocation order for. And even if that's money you have to hang on to until next season, that's perfectly fine. And I think the hardest part for FC Cincinnati is, there might be some players out there that would be interested in coming to Major League Soccer. They could be used or acquired through that mechanism. But do they want to come here right now? Like if I were a player who were subject to the allocation order, and I knew that, I'd be like, no thanks. Like, I'm not going to go there right now and solve the problems they have at the end of their season. At best case scenario, I maybe get them into the playoffs if I hit the ground running. If I'm going to make that move to Major League Soccer right now, I'm making it to a contender. And I would suspect that if it's anyone who's going to be purchasing this top spot in the allocation order, is either someone really trying to stack the deck for next season, or it's someone who's trying to make an impact right before the playoffs now.
I mean, I don't even know if you can bring in a guy before the playoffs, because you'd have to get him in like tomorrow. Yeah, you'd have to get him in here, and then he'd have to quarantine for 10 days, and then you have to roster him, I think, by the last day, the last game of the season to be able to use him. I think you have to submit a 28 or 30 man roster. So I think, okay, you come in here, let's say you sign now, you transfer in November, then you sit out through June or what, not June, May, April, or maybe you just get his rights and you loan him back for the rest of this winter period till then. So I don't know. I think it'd be tough for this year.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that they can trade the spot. I will be delightfully surprised if they get anything for it this late into the transfer window, which closes coming up. What time on Thursday, Bri? Did we ever determine that?
No idea.
Well, it'll be sometime on Thursday. So if anything does happen and FC Cincinnati moves that spot and acquires some assets, we will certainly be reporting on it at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. As we begin to wrap things up here on this edition of Cincinnati Soccer Talk, it's kind of I don't want to say a sad week, but it's a unique week in the history of FC Cincinnati in that they're saying goodbye to their very first home, Nippert Stadium. The last match coming up on Wednesday. Both Jeff and DJ will be there for the match on Wednesday night against Sporting Kansas City. You knew that it was more than likely going to be a very packed house at Nippert had fans been allowed to be there. Usually the last home game of the year is quite the big number from an attendance standpoint, but a little bit of a bittersweet moment in that no fans will be allowed at the match, excluding Jeff and DJ because they're fans, but they're definitely working on Wednesday night. So Jeff, I'll start with you since you'll be there and you've been one of the few folks able to attend matches at Nippert this year. What's going to be your fondest memory of Nippert Stadium?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. It's funny. I was thinking about this today that I've always had kind of a love-hate relationship with Nippert. And here's why. I think it's obviously a charming facility for college football and always has been. One of the most intimate settings in all of college football and historic settings. For soccer, it was never a very efficient soccer facility. It's just not built for 2 hours in terms of fans flowing in and out, restrooms, concessions, all those things. The sight lines weren't the best. The Bailey, I always said, was up in a choir loft. But the funny thing about Nippert is that it was just kind of the shell. It was just kind of the concrete. It was the sea of blue and orange that showed up for every match. And it was having professional soccer back in Cincinnati and the success that the team brought and everything the team brought. It was almost like, it's kind of a bad analogy maybe, but kind of like Woodstock. Like, well, here's our farm. And here staged the greatest event in the history of rock and roll. But is this the greatest farm in the world? No. But if all these people show up and all these musicians show up, it's the greatest event in the history of rock and roll. And I really think that what FC Cincinnati did at Nippert through all the 5 years that they were there is they staged the greatest soccer event in America, and they did it night after night after night. And it was because of the fans and because of what the club brought to the city and to the atmosphere in that stadium. But I know as CSTers, we were all asked provide our best memory at Nippert, which is so difficult because, I enjoyed it because 90% during my journalism career, 95% of the sporting events I attend in a working capacity. So I finally had the ability to go to games and enjoy a beer or two, or and root for a club and just kind of be a part of an atmosphere like that. So if I have to pick like my favorite memory, I think it will always be the US Open Cup semifinal against Red Bulls. And part of that is them going up 2-0 and remembering Austin Berry's header and just the 33,000. It was crazy. But my favorite memory, and this will always be my favorite memory, was at the end of the match, toward the end, after Bradley Wright Phillips had already done his damage. My wife said, do you want to, let's go. Let's get a head start to the parking garage. And I remember, and I'm never one to leave sporting events early. And I said to her, no, I want to stay. And she's like, why? And she's a more emotional fan than me. So I think she was pretty disappointed by blowing the 2-0 lead, as we all were. But I said, no, I want to see what's going to happen. She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I think we should all stand and applaud, or I just want to see what's going to happen at the end of the match. It was just an amazing, just magical run. It probably sealed FC Cincinnati's MLS fate. And sure enough, at the end, I know I stood up and cheered, and other people cheered. And it's not that people weren't disappointed about the loss, but it was just appreciation for what the club had done, and for something that we haven't experienced in sports in this city, maybe ever, something like that. And then the Red Bull players applauding to the fans as if to say, this is the greatest thing we've experienced too. Just a phenomenal moment, and I'll never forget it. And it'll be really strange on Wednesday to have an empty stadium. It just doesn't seem right. Obviously there are reasons for that, and I'm 100% on board with that, but it's the irony of the last game at Nippert without fans. It just, boggles the mind. But
yeah, I go back to that match, and I remember afterwards, Jesse Marsh saying to Taylor Twellman that it was the best soccer environment he had been in the United States. And I thought, wow, that's high praise for somebody who's played games or, coached games in Portland and Seattle and whatnot. So it was a ruckus night for sure. You mentioned, Jeff, that you went to FC Cincinnati games because it was your chance to get away from work. Well, DJ went to Nippert to work as a member of the FC Cincinnati communication staff. In years past, you've been able to go as a fan now too, DJ. But what were some of your favorite memories of being at Nippert?
Man, yeah, it's a little different for me, I think, than I think a lot of people probably relate to it. Nippert was an office for me for a really long time for a lot of different reasons, and match days are the obvious examples there, right? Like I usually would get there 6 to 7 hours before kickoff on a typical match day, and then be there 2 to 3 hours after a kickoff or after the final whistle. So those were really obvious, but I was also there for training all the time before the training center was built out in Milford. They did all their training at Nippert. So the number of hours that I've spent stuck behind the parking garage gates that wouldn't raise or go, or even with the pass, is truly an astounding number in its own right. So I've just kind of this weird relationship that sometimes it was still going to the office. And while match days were always exciting, they were very daunting experiences. So a lot of times I associate Nippert with exhaustion, because by the time I'd be getting out of there, I barely had my wits about me, and I'd start my long trek back north. And so there's that aspect of it, but it's also really special to me too, because not only did I work for FCC, but I also worked for the Cincinnati Saints in the NPSL prior to FCC's arrival. And I remember when we first started catching all the rumors about the team, and before I had an opportunity to help break the news that they were coming, we'd heard stuff about Nippert being the venue, and being someone who'd worked for the Saints, where like it was a great game where we had like 80 to 100 people show up. The idea of filling Nippert just seemed unimaginable. And I remember like specifically joking, we were like, oh, Nippert Stadium, like, what are they going to do? Like get Carl Lindner involved? And then we all like threw our heads back and laughed about it. And it seemed just preposterous that that was even a thing. And fast forward to that first match, I think it was a year and a half later. And we got to see that epic goal from Ugo against Charlotte in that first ever home match. And that match will forever stand out to me as like a holy crap, like this is a real thing moment. Like I'd always believed that Cincinnati soccer could be something, but when I looked out across a sea of 14,000 people, which now seems kind of small, but then seemed like, oh my gosh, this is bigger than we could have ever imagined. It like that, the dichotomy between where I was after a Saints match talking with 10 people of the 80 people who were there that match, to the idea of 14,000 people showing up like that will never not be mind blowing to me. And then the only other moment, I hate to hog the mic here, but the one that stands out to me was, and everyone loves this match, but it's the Chicago match in the Open Cup prior to the New York game. And what really stood out to me was after that penalty shootout win, because I was the social media person, we didn't actually have like a team of people. Like I was the team. And so I was there like typing on the computer, getting the updates in like, oh, we won the match. And then I was like, I need more content. So I ran out we had this really tiny balcony at the end of the press box for this really itty bitty little suite. And I ran out onto that suite. And I remember opening the door and the roar, like it was loud in the press box. And the Nippert's press box is weird in that it's almost like a bulletproof
Yeah, it is.
environment. And so you feel really detached from the games a lot of the time. And so you can hear it out there, but it's muffled. And so when I opened that door, it wasn't just like the sound that hit me. It was a wave of energy that like knocked me back. And that night, like I can't perfectly encapsulate like the full flowing of emotion that you could feel in that building. And that I will forever, and like I've been to World Cup matches and Premier League games and Gold Cup finals and MLS final, like I've been to the whole 9 yards, and that is by and far away the most incredible soccer experience I've ever had. And the fact that that was at Nippert Stadium to me is like, again, just mind blowing.
That's so well said, DJ, because those were the two for, if I had to give a 1A and 1B, 1A is the first match. I remember sitting there, and I think, Bri, you probably remember this before the match. We like threw out what's our attendance prediction, and I said 14, and we got like just over that. It was like 14-4 or something like that. But even then, like it didn't really register until I was sitting in the stands in like the 70th minute, and I'm looking at the stadium, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a ton of people here for a soccer game in Cincinnati. Like that just didn't happen. It didn't happen. And that night I knew like, oh my God, this is going to be the hottest thing in Cincinnati. And sure enough, the next match, it was like what, 29,000. I mean, it never stopped. And so for me, the Nippert memory I have will always be that first match with my family. We've been to every home opener that there has been at Nippert Stadium, the four of us. So I'm sad to see it go, but also excited for new beginnings at the West End Stadium. Bri, you got any favorite memories yourself?
I'm just trying to figure out why you hate me. I got to follow the poetry of you three here. It's not fair. Tell you what. So I'm going to put it to you this way. Your first apartment you had some really cool memories there, but over time you moved out and you created your own thing. And then you have bigger and better memories. And I can't wait for those bigger and better memories in the West End. I think Nippert was awesome. I cannot believe we did what we did there. And that was fan driven and just absolutely incredible. That first game, Charlotte, holy crap. I sat there for 20 minutes afterward, just sitting there, and then we saw you and Yosef, and you're just like, holy crap, that happened. So amazing times. Never forget that Jibby goal versus Columbus.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And that was cool. But love the place. I have great memories of it. But I cannot wait to go to West End, man. I cannot wait.
It's going to be exciting at the West End Stadium, but Nippert, I think we could all agree, is going to be a tough act to follow. Right? I mean, they set the standard, and now the West End Stadium is going to have to be even bigger and better.
It's because you haven't driven up and around it yet, pal.
I know. You're right. I've been watching, and I'm one of those guys who, no joke, every day I'm watching the construction cams, and I keep waiting to see when they're putting that turf down. I will say I didn't get a chance to look at it today, but I definitely will be for sure tomorrow checking that out. But it's going to be exciting. There's no question. West End Stadium, a chance for, I don't want to say a rebirth, but it's going to be, exciting to have FC Cincinnati have their own place that they can call home. It's still a bummer that Nippert Stadium, we didn't get a chance to say goodbye as fans, but it is going to be pretty exciting next year at the West End Stadium, no doubt.
I want to tell Dan McNally, I got a spot on my wall right down here where we can do cutouts of AstroTurf and frame them and sell them for $200 and help pay off that debt for the new stadium. So ready for it. Trust me, we'll buy it.
Yeah, you think they'll do that? I mean,
they sold pieces of the Vortex for like $1,000 each, so they better sell this.
The problem is, FC Cincinnati, do they own the turf? Or does UC own the turf?
I think FCC have to put in new line turf. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah, you're right.
So they're going to tear it up and then give UC a new field? Interesting.
Well, maybe then Memphis can have their walkthrough Fridays before the games.
Oh, man. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on your favorite memories of Nippert Stadium. And, of course, we'll have stuff on the website all week with our thoughts as well. Email us feedback at cincinnati-soccertalk.com. Don't forget, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating and review over at cincinnati-soccertalk.com/Apple Podcasts. And get subscribed so you don't miss a single episode of not just CST, but you can get March to Match Day, which Brad and Boston are doing each and every week. And then, of course, you can check out Talking Tactics with Coach Brad Goff. Coach breaks it down each and every week. He didn't do an episode last week. That's because he was sitting in on the FC Cincinnati Coaches Corner and learned quite a bit from the folks there at the higher-ups with the FCC. So he'll be talking about that this week on his show as well. And since we've got him on the show, you got to go check out The Wrong Side of the Pond, right, DJ?
Of course.
Yeah. For folks who maybe aren't familiar with The Wrong Side of the Pond, tell them a little bit more.
Yeah, we are in our 8th season of the Wrong Side of the Pond podcast, myself and my co-host, Jeremy Lance. We typically cover things more from a European perspective. Premier League is kind of our primary focus. Then we shift things over to Major League Soccer, but span kind of all across the spectrum of soccer. But a long time going now, but a new show recording tomorrow night, which should be out hopefully on Wednesday. So check your feeds for that. We're available in all the typical places you find your podcasts.
And I also want to say thank you, DJ, for taking it easy on me after the Spurs absolutely destroyed my squad.
Hey, it's the least I can do. I still, came prepared today to do what I can,
Oh, yeah. Well, DJ, we appreciate you being on the show, man. You got any final thoughts?
I'm just ready for bed. I'm coming off 2 straight weekends of tournaments, and I had training again tonight, so it's time to hit the pillow.
Well, DJ, we appreciate you being on the show. Glad having you on as a contributor, and we'll have to do this a little bit more often.
Absolutely, guys. It's been a pleasure.
It's all right. The final thoughts, I will kick it over to the professor, Jeff Wallner.
I don't really have anything prepared. Just that I'll be, thinking of all the fans, and in particular the season ticket holders on Wednesday. While I'm sitting there in the press box looking at an empty stadium, it'll be very strange, because I'm confident that even with everything that's gone on with the club this year, that place would be a sea of blue and orange on Wednesday, would be absolutely packed to the rafters. And I'm sure the club, Jeff Birding being the showman that he is, would have had and probably did have a lot of big plans for that night. So it's going to be bizarre, but speaking of the Westin Stadium, my plan is to leave home a little bit early and take a little detour on my way to Nippert and drive by the Westin Stadium, just so I can kind of experience the present and the near future. So I'm very, very excited about everything that's going on the West End, not just the stadium and the future of the club, but also the future of our city, OTR, the West End, and what that stadium's going to mean. Excited about it all, but first things first, we'll give Nippert an improper send-off. Not a proper send-off on Wednesday because we won't have the fans there, but we'll give it an improper send-off.
Good stuff, Jeff. As always, appreciate you being on the show, bud.
Thanks.
All right, last but not least, I'll kick it over to you, Bri.
My last show of the 2020 season. Can't believe it. Can't believe it's happened. This is our fifth season of doing this. So it's been a heck of a ride so far, and hopefully here's another 5 years coming, and hopefully a little more winning. But yeah, man, I'm sad we are turning the page, but the future is going to be awesome. I know it is. It's going to be a hell of a ride, and just enjoy Wednesday, and can't wait to turn the page.
Good stuff, Bri. Appreciate you, and enjoy your vacation, buddy.
There we go.
And stay away from the crazies down in Florida, all right?
Ha! Yeah, no, this is a very socially distant trip, so.
Good for you. Well deserved, buddy.
Yeah, bunkering down in a house with a pool.
Yeah. My final thoughts this week. I wrapped the show last week talking about it. Unfortunately, we got the bad news on Thursday, or early Friday morning, that Daryl Grove of the Total Soccer Show ultimately passed away. So sad. Way too young. Billy Joel, what does he say? Only the good die young. Just disappointing to get that news, unfortunately. So Daryl, rest in peace, buddy. We're all thinking about you. Taylor, we're thinking about you as well, and the family over at Total Soccer Show. You guys do tremendous work, and I know Daryl's a massive loss. He was a massive Wolverhampton Wanderers fan, and it was pretty cool to see Wolverhampton this week even pay tribute to Daryl. So rest easy, Daryl. We're all thinking about you, and our thoughts and prayers are with the Grove family here at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. That will do it for this episode of Cincinnati Soccer Talk. My thanks to DJ Switzer, Jeff Wallner, and Brian Weigel. I'm Subs, reminding you to watch your tackles, and we will see you all next week.